family was murdered inside of their home, but the main suspect could have been 2,000 miles away. A medical examiner would change their time of death on the stand and cause many to wonder if the convicted killer was guilty of the crime or if they had just sentenced an innocent man to death. What is the truth? Will we ever know what really happened to the Rowe family? You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Mckenna, but today's case is a very strange one. It is bizarre in many different ways, different timelines that don't really make sense, testimonies that changed throughout the trial, but yet were still kept and used as far as for the sentencing, and there's pleas of innocence. The killer said that he was truly not guilty from the very beginning to the very end of his life. And many were campaigning for a reversal or a retrial of his case prior to being put to death. However, that did not occur. So today we are going to be discussing whether an innocent man was sent to death or whether we just don't know. Either way, I will let you listen and come up with your own thoughts. Always leave them down below. Now let's get into the story. So it was 2004 in Missouri, and 28-year-old Angela Rowe had 3 children. She had 2 daughters who were 10-year-old Alexis Conley, 6-year-old Akira Conley, and a 5-year-old son named Tyrese Conley, and they all lived in Jennings, which is really not too far from St. Louis, Missouri. They were all said to be very carefree and happy as a family. They had a small brick family home on the 2000th block of Park Lane. It was decorated with plastic candy canes and Santa Claus ornaments because it was around the time of Christmas. But on December 3rd, the police would arrive at the residence and they would find that the house was locked. Now, they had been alerted by family members and friends that Angela had not been answering her phone call or talked to them in several days, so it was basically just a quick welfare check. You see, back on November 21st, Angela had called in to work to say that she wasn't making it to her job as a housekeeper. She needed the day off. Now, I don't believe it was specified as to why, but the kids also went to their aunt's at this time for an early Thanksgiving. It was that weekend that they were going to go. Angela would speak to her friend the next day, that was the 22nd, but after that she said that she couldn't get a hold of Angela. Now on November 25th, her sister said that she spoke to her on the phone. However, there were no records of this on their cell phone records between the two, but this will be explained in a little bit as to why there were no records of this. But Angela then would miss going into work without calling in on the 26th, the 27th, and the 28th. Now, this is when they presumed that she had gone missing. However, the neighbor of Angela would come forward to say that he saw the whole family okay, alive and well, the weekend of the 27th and the 28th. Now, the kids' Aunt Beverly, who they had gone to for an early Thanksgiving around the 21st, would say that she also talked to Angela on the phone on the weekend of the 27th and the 28th. Though again, phone records did not show this. They showed the last calls between Angela and Beverly being November 19th and the 21st, which is when the kids were over at her house, but nothing later than that. So it was all just very suspicious. And then the day after anyone had ever said that they had spoken to her, on the 29th, the kids were supposed to be returning to school after Thanksgiving break. However, they were absent for an entire week. When the police arrived at the home, they found several newspapers in the front yard, mail in the mailbox. Somebody obviously had not been there to collect them, and something was definitely wrong. Now, like I said, all the doors were locked, the windows were locked, the front door was not damaged. There was no signs of any sort of forced entry. So the police did enter through a bedroom window to get inside. And inside, they found that the home was not ransacked as they had expected. The TV was on, and the air conditioner was also set at 50 degrees, which doesn't seem relevant. However, it was December, freezing cold in Missouri, and it was set at 50 degrees Fahrenheit. A very cold temperature compared to the normal person inside of their home and what they would set it as. But the air conditioner would be the least of their worries, because inside they would find Angela and her 3 children, and it was brutal. The autopsy revealed that Angela, she had actually been covered by blankets and shot 4 times, twice in the left arm, once in the chest, and once in the head, which ultimately would kill her. Alexis and Akira had 2 shots to the head each, and Tyrese was shot in the head once. The children were also all lined up on the bed, and nobody had survived. Now, the medical examiner ended up being Dr. Philip Birch, who was a longtime deputy chief medical examiner, who stated that the gunshots were from a .38 or a .357 revolver. Now, due to the condition of their bodies, he said that they were in the early stages of decomposition, but past rigor mortis. And he said that this meant that this could have occurred within 2 or 3 days of them finding the bodies on December 3rd. Now, the Jennings Police Department requested help at this point from the Major Case Squad. Investigators would find that Angela actually had a boyfriend living with her and her children at the time of the murders. He had been living there for about a year at this point. This was a 40-year-old named Leonard Taylor, who actually went by Raheem, so we'll be calling him Raheem, and it was found that he had a long criminal record. He was actually wanted for murder in California because he was a suspect. So a nationwide hunt began, and it turned out that his criminal record started all the way back in the 1980s when he was convicted for narcotics and concealed weapon charges. By 1991, he was actually arrested for transporting and selling narcotics, but it escalated the year later when he would be convicted of rape and child molestation. But like I said, he was suspected for murder. And this actually happened in 1990 when a 19-year-old man named Jack Lipolo had been shot and killed during an argument at an apartment complex where Raheem was staying, and he was actually using an alias while he was staying there. But he was also said to brag about this murder later on. And then in 1999, he was arrested for failing to register as a sex offender. Investigators found out that he had around 17 aliases that he had used prior in his life, including Michael Chambers, Louis Bradley, and Jason Lovely. Now, U.S. Marshals in Kentucky were actually stalking a home around this point. This was in Madisonville, where Raheem allegedly had a friend. Whether this was another girlfriend, some say it was a girl he was with, some say it was just some friends. But on December 9th, so 6 days since the police had found the bodies, they had watched Raheem jump into this car with a man, and he was in the back seat. They pulled them over, and they found Raheem hiding in the backseat holding a knife. The marshals said when they found him, Raheem did not say anything, he did not move, and he was using the name of Jason Lovely, not Raheem, to his friends during this time. Now, he was arrested with fake IDs on him, as well as a pamphlet on how to create a fake identity. Raheem claimed that he was in California. Now, he was found in Kentucky. The murders happened in Missouri. He said he was actually in California when his girlfriend and children would have been killed. He said this during questioning. He said that he was on a flight on November 26th, 7 days before they were found. And remember, the medical examiner said they were probably shot dead 2 to 3 days before that. So he said he was on a flight 7 days before that. Now, this was actually confirmed by surveillance footage. He had booked a flight to Ontario, California that day to meet his wife. That's right, on top of living with Angela and possibly being a murder suspect in 2 different cases, he also had a wife. Now, his wife was named Debreen Williams, who lived in California and had their daughter living with her. Now, the wife was said not to be very helpful in the investigation when they did go to her to question her, but Raheem admitted that he had driven across the country from California to his friend living in Kentucky, and that is why he was there, and that he was basically insisting he was innocent. But when Raheem was taken to trial for the murder of Angela Rowe and her 3 children, the defense stated that multiple people witnessed Angela being alive and well after Raheem was already in California. In fact, Raheem's 13-year-old daughter, Deja, said that her dad had come to California to meet her, that they had never actually met before, they were hanging out together, and that she remembers when they were together, they had actually called Angela, and Deja spoke to Angela, and it was the first time they had ever talked, and Deja said that Angela was talking to her about coming to Missouri to meet her and her kids. Deja even said she spoke to the girls. Deja said that she was happy to connect with her father and his new family, and that she even cried a bit that day because she was so happy. The defense also said he was a career criminal. There was no doubt about that, but he sold drugs and didn't have a motive for these murders. They also claimed that there were other suspects who weren't properly investigated, though I could find no mention of any other suspects that were thought to be connected. The prosecution, on the other hand, said that everything that they were saying was make-believe, that Raheem likely killed his girlfriend and her children on November 22nd or 23rd, that he likely killed them before he actually went to California, and they had been dead for weeks when the police found them. They said they believed he killed them on November 22nd or 23rd because Angela's phone showed zero activity after the 23rd. They had looked at her phone records and said that prior to that, she was showing that she was making 70 outgoing calls or texts a day, and then it went silent. To prove this, they then brought Dr. Philip Birch, the medical examiner, to the stand. He would tell the court that the victims had been killed 2 to 3 weeks before they were found, meaning that Raheem was home, it was before he had gone to California, and that he killed them prior to going. Dr. Birch said he originally said 2 to 3 days because he did not know the air conditioning was on in the home, and it changed his mind about the time period due to the condition of the bodies in a colder climate. The prosecution would also tell the court that Raheem's brother Perry was taken into custody 5 days after the bodies were found, and he had told police that he had gotten a phone call from Raheem where he admitted to the crime. He said it was November 23rd, just before midnight, when Raheem had asked Perry for money. He then would call him saying, "I killed Angela. I didn't mean to kill her, but she came at me with a knife and I couldn't get her off of me. I shot her 2 or 3 times. Perry said that Raheem was then saying something about that he killed the kids or that he was going to kill the kids because they had witnessed him killing their mother. But phone records confirmed that Perry had gotten a call from his brother on November 23rd, 11:24 p.m., and on November 24th at 12:05 p.m. Then later that day on the November 24th, Perry was getting called so many times by Raheem, but actually it was using Angela's landline. Perry said that he had told his girlfriend what Raheem had told him, and this was, a few days later, and then on the 25th, he got another call from Raheem, and his girlfriend was listening, and Raheem was saying that he stayed in the house with the bodies since he had killed them because he was waiting for a letter from his wife to come to the home. Now, the girlfriend would be questioned by police about what she heard, and she allegedly told officers that Perry asked Raheem how he was there with the people since they were dead, and that Raheem told him that he turned off the heat and turned on the air. He also said something along the lines of the bee wouldn't let him go. Raheem then called Perry 3 more times that day, and this was the basis of their whole theory. However, they brought Perry to the stand, and he would recant all of this. He said that he only said those things because he was threatened with imprisonment if he didn't. But a neighbor was also brought to the stand saying that on November 25th, they saw a man walking out of Rowe's home that they didn't recognize. Now, Raheem's sister-in-law allegedly confessed to the police that she had taken Raheem to the airport on the 26th. His plane ticket was bought by his wife, Deb, a day prior, and was actually under the name Louis Bradley, one of Raheem's aliases. And while he was getting in her car, she saw him allegedly throw a long-barreled revolver in the sewer. He then left Perry's car, which he was driving, at her home, as well as a box for him inside. But that wasn't the strangest part. She told police, allegedly, that Raheem's final words to her were, "This will probably be the last time you see me alive. I need to get out of St. Louis. Some people are trying to kill me." and you're going to hear some things about me that are not true. Don't believe them. Now, the gun was searched for in the sewer and was never recovered, and Raheem made it to California. But by December 3rd, the day the bodies were found in Missouri, he was in California making several calls to a number in Columbus, Georgia, which seemed to have nothing to do with the investigation, and nobody knew who this was to. The prosecution then claimed that at the time of Raheem's arrest, they made the big claim that there was blood on the bridge of his glasses and that it matched Angela's DNA. However, it was a very small sample, and it was said that they could only get a partial DNA profile that eliminated Angela's kids but didn't eliminate her. And they said that it was only possibly blood due to not being able to do a confirmatory test. But on February 29th of 2008, after 4.5 hours of deliberation, Raheem was found guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to death. Now, his defense immediately tried to stop the execution from the time he was sentenced, and Raheem's family said they weren't asked to testify. They weren't asked for statements about his character. They weren't asked anything. But during his time on death row, Raheem was interviewed by the Missourians for alternatives to the death penalty. He spoke of his brother Perry's testimony, his abuse by police, and the lack of evidence of this phone call confession. And he also said he was innocent. I'll let you watch in his own words.
Jennings police pull him over. They call the dispatch and find out that he's in Missouri. Snatch him out of his truck, take him to Jennings police station. They hold him there for 13 hours. They tell him that they believe that I committed these murders. And what they want him to do is, they want him to make a tape stating that I called him on November the 22nd now. And I confessed to him that I killed Angela and the kids. He's like, nah. He says, later on, he says, they take him out in the back of the Jennings station, beat him up, put gun in his mouth, tell him, listen, you're a truck driver. We can make it where you can be found dead in your truck. We'll make it where your mama be found dead in her house. These are things that they threatened him with. We'll charge you with this. You want to make this tape, boy. They take him in the room. They turn the video on and everything. The first thing out of the police mouth, they said, we're here with Perry Taylor, the brother of Leonard Taylor, the suspect in the quadruple homicide in Jennings. Say, Mr. Taylor, now you know the next word that come out of your mouth will determine the rest of your life. First of all, when it comes down to trial, they pulled him over in Kansas City, pulled him out of his truck, put a body attachment to him, drug him, and when I say drug him into the courtroom, meaning they was pushing him in chains in county jail or trying everything. This was not a person who had called the police and said, hey, I want to report a crime. They asked him in a sworn deposition what happened. He told them exactly what happened. He said, man, they pulled me out of my truck. They took me to the police station. They held me for 13 hours in which they came, they beat up on me, they threatened me, they put guns in my mouth and everything to get me to make a statement against my brother and say that my brother called me and confessed this. And he did not call me and do that. This is what happened. Not only did I not commit the crime, but for one, like I said, there was no motive. You know, I had no reason to commit the crime. I wasn't even in the state of Missouri when these murders took place. What I find really amazing is the same night that evening that they found my loved ones, Angela and the kids, in the house deceased. And her sister said, where is her husband, Leonard Taylor? He should be in there too. They took her to the Jennings police station and talked to her and asked her when was the last time she spoke to Angela, when was the last time she seen Angela. She said, I just talked to my sister on the last time I talked to her was on the 28th of November. Now mind you, I left on the 26th. She said, the last time I talked to my sister was on the 28th. I talked to her on the 27th and the 28th, but the last time I talked to her was the 28th when I borrowed $50 from her and she gave it to me. Not that I talked to her on the phone, but I talked to her in person, face to face. I seen my sister on November the 28th. And they said, well, you should say, yeah, it was right after Thanksgiving, the weekend after Thanksgiving. Not only did she say that at that particular time, but Elma Massey which stayed next door to a couple of houses down to us. He worked in the medical field, plus he was they call him preacher. He was a deacon at the church and everything. No criminal record. Never been locked up for anything, had no kind of conviction or anything like that. He told them, he said, my daughter, he had a 12-year-old daughter. He said, my daughter played with them children. The oldest girl was 11 years old, Alexis. Said, my daughter played with them on the weekend after Thanksgiving, on the 27th and 28th. He said it was either the 20th or 30th, but he said, I was off work one of those days, 29th or 30th of that week after Thanksgiving. He says, and I seen a male at the house, and I was just sitting in the car. He said, I was just sitting in the car and I was looking. He said, the guy that was at the house, he was getting ready to come out. Well, he said, actually came out and went to the driveway and got some out of a vehicle and went back in. But when he seen me, he ducked into the house. Mind you, again, I'm gone on the 26th.
Now, statements from the victim's family about the timing of the phone calls and when they last talked to her, they were a bit confusing, as you heard in the beginning. And many didn't seem to remember correctly what day it was. In fact, Angela's sister didn't even have records of a phone call on the 28th to her sister. But Angela's sister would come forward to say that that's actually because Angela was calling from a payphone, not from her own phone. But this did not come out in court. Her sister refused to testify, and so they just kind of brushed over that. Evidence that also wasn't presented in court due to hearsay, but was later revealed, was a checkbook from Angela's home. Investigators had obtained this from inside during the search, and they found that a copy of the check was still there, but the original had been ripped off, and then there was that one that leaves the impression of what you have written. And on the copy, it was dated November 27th, 2004, the day after Raheem was on a flight. And it was for $390. The pay to the order line was blank. They didn't know who it was going to, but it had Angela's home phone number written on the memo. This just added another strange element. I don't believe they had a signature, from Angela, but it was just very strange. It was her checkbook. But while on death row, the governor refused to issue clemency to Raheem, saying that despite his self-serving claim of innocence, the facts still remain. Now, this was brought to the governor because the president of the National NAACP, Derek Johnson, had wrote a letter to him saying that the evidence presented at Raheem's trial did not support Raheem's conviction. Many have come forward about doubts of his guilt, and this includes a St. Louis forensic pathologist named Dr. Jane Turner, who reviewed the trial and all of the evidence. And in her affidavit on January 25th of 2023, she claimed that the testimony of the medical examiner, Dr. Philip Birch, could be discredited with a full view of the autopsy records. She said the defense was not aware of the change in his testimony of the time period, so they were not given enough time to hire a forensic investigator to further examine the actual time of death for the jury. She also stated that since Raheem did not testify, there were no witnesses, no murder weapon, that everything was based on circumstantial evidence. Now, Dr. Birch did pass in 2014, and Perry, Raheem's brother, passed in 2015, so many who were testifying in the case were passing away as his many appeals were denied. Many citizens protested Raheem's death sentence, and that was whether they didn't support the death penalty or whether they didn't believe he was guilty. There were many petitions signed. But on February 3rd of 2023, very recently, Raheem's attorneys filed a request for the St. Louis County Prosecutor's Office to review his case due to his airtight alibi and the prosecutors engaging in misconduct during the trial. This was actually brought up because there was a new law that went into effect in Missouri in 2021 that allowed prosecutors to file a motion to intervene in cases of wrongful convictions. Raheem's attorneys said, I think any fair-minded person that looks at all the evidence we have now would have serious doubts about whether he's guilty, and that's all we're really asking for, to be able to be given an opportunity in front of a judge. Now, Raheem also said to them, "I was unreasonably targeted, falsely accused, wrongfully indicted, unjustly convicted, and cruelly sentenced to death. Authorities ignored the facts just to get a conviction. All they wanted was somebody to heap these crimes on, even if it was the wrong somebody." Now, LaWanda Rowe was another of Angela's sisters, and she did an interview with KSDK News, and she claimed that her sister feared for her life due to Raheem's drug-dealing past. For the most part, it seems as though the family strongly believes that he is guilty.
It's been really rough because, our sister was brutally murdered, her and her children. He's had all these years to sit and think of a way to get out of this. They need to go through with the execution.
Now, the prosecutor's office said that they were reviewing the case due to the quickly approaching execution date. But because they were still in the review process, Raheem made a last-minute appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. This was denied, so he then made a request to the Missouri Supreme Court, which was also denied. So on February 8th of 2023, at the age of 58, after 20 years on death row, he was given lethal injection, and his final words were, "Muslims don't die, but live eternally in the hearts of our friends and family. Death is not your enemy, it is your destiny. Look forward to meeting it. Peace." Then he was executed. His last meal was said to be a seafood platter with shrimp, fries, a cheeseburger, cheesecake, and vanilla ice cream. He had seen his 3 daughters that he had, his sister, his 2 attorneys, and a spiritual advisor. Though it was said he was unable to have a religious figure pray with him during the execution, even though death row inmates are supposed to have that right. 9 members of Angela's family were present for the execution, and Angela's sister said, "I'm at a point in my life right now. I'm okay, but I'm not. But I know justice was served. It's kind of hard trying to move forward, but I think I can do it." She said it was so painful to go through it over and over again with all of his appeals, but there were also so many protesters outside saying that he shouldn't have been executed. It was also said that his team was working on another appeal, which was scheduled for the following Tuesday after his execution, and the executive director of the Midwest Innocence Project was working with him and tried to call him that very day to let him know that another appeal was in the works, but she was told instead that it was already done. He was already dead. Raheem's daughter had also allegedly flown out to St. Louis during this time because she said she had evidence to support his alibi. Many called his execution irreversible justice. Was Raheem an innocent man? Was he executed for a crime he didn't commit? Was he really 2,000 miles away when his family was murdered? And he was still found guilty? Why would Raheem tell his sister-in-law that someone tried to kill him before he got on that plane? Who was coming after him? And did he think someone was coming after him because they had killed his family first? Was there some other person or people involved here that have never been brought up, have never been spoken of? But if so, why would Raheem go 20 years on death row and not say anything about them? If he didn't murder his family, perhaps someone from his past did, and he was too afraid to say it? Do you believe that he was guilty or innocent? Or are you left undecided as many people are? Angela's family, like I said, seems to believe he is guilty and deserved what he received. What do you think? Is anything about Raheem's alleged phone call confession to his brother Perry true? Did they talk? It was shown that they had a phone call. What did they really talk about that day? Why is the timeline so incredibly murky? How is the checkbook found of Angela's the day after Raheem would have left? Why did the neighbors see them after that date? And yet the medical examiner would say that now it was 2 to 3 weeks that they had been dead before they were found. And I don't believe a second autopsy was ever done by a different medical examiner. They went with the one, and even when he changed his mind, they didn't do any further digging before finding Raheem guilty, and even after that. When do you think the last time Angela was seen or heard from really was? Was it the 23rd when her phone allegedly stopped having any communication, and that is when they were killed? Or Was it, the 28th, the 27th, when people have said that they had that communication all the way up until then? I feel like there is something we're not being told in this case, whether that's from any side. But it's a tragedy on all sides. It's a tragedy for the Rowe family and those little children. It's a tragedy if an innocent man was sent to death and that the real killer remains free. It's a tragedy if Angela's boyfriend did kill her and her children. But again, just like he had said, what motive did he have? Did he want to get away from the girlfriend to get back to his wife? Did Angela know about the wife? These are things we just don't know, and I'm not sure we will ever know. Many people have been talking about this case recently due to his very recent execution and the fact that really no further investigation was done after the initial trial. For 20 years. For 20 years, Raheem sat there saying he was innocent, and they just ignored him. Is it because investigators know something or had something that isn't necessarily out to the public? Maybe. Is it because they just believed that it was him and didn't want to look at anybody else? Did they push this on him even though they weren't sure and didn't want to deal with the repercussions of that? We may never know. But it's also horrific if Raheem did kill them and he has been trying to manipulate the system and the public for 20 years saying that he didn't. About 14 years prior, he was a suspect in a murder. I feel like the more I talk, the more questions I have. If you have any more questions, leave them down below, and maybe someone who knows a little bit more or who has knowledge about something will be able to answer and give us further information. But I want to mention places like the NAACP, the Innocence Project. They are doing wonderful things. But don't forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.